Here are 10 significant historical events that took place on June 4, 1783. The Montgolfier brothers performed the first successful hot air balloon flight. On June 4, 1783, Joseph and Jacques Montgolfier successfully launched their hot air balloon in France, carrying a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. This marked the first successful manned flight in history and paved the way for modern aviation. 1913 Suffragette Emily Davison dies after throwing herself in front of the King's horse. On June 4, 1913, British suffragette Emily Davison threw herself in front of the King's horse at the Epsom Derby in protest of women's lack of suffrage. She was trampled by the horse and died 4 days later, becoming a martyr for the women's suffrage movement. 1940 Dunkirk evacuation begins. On June 4, 1940, the evacuation of British and Allied soldiers from Dunkirk, France began. Over the course of 9 days, a flotilla of small boats, including fishing boats, pleasure craft, and lifeboats, rescued over 338,000 soldiers from the advancing German army. 1942 Battle of Midway begins. On June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway began in the Pacific theater of World War II. The battle was a turning point in the war, as American forces defeated a Japanese fleet and gained the upper hand in the Pacific. 1963 Civil rights activist Medgar Evers assassinated. On June 4, 1963, civil rights activist Medgar Evers was assassinated in Jackson, Mississippi. Evers was a prominent leader in the civil rights movement and had been working to desegregate schools and public spaces in the state. 1989 Tiananmen Square Massacre. On June 4, 1989, Chinese troops and tanks moved into Tiananmen Square in Beijing to quell pro-democracy protests. The troops opened fire on the protesters, killing hundreds and possibly thousands of people. The massacre became a turning point in Chinese history and had a profound impact on the country's politics and international relations. 1996 Irish Republican Army ends ceasefire. On June 4, 1996, the Irish Republican Army, IRA, ended its ceasefire in Northern Ireland, marking a return to violence in the long-running conflict between Irish Republicans and Unionists. 2003 Martha Stewart indicted on charges of securities fraud. On June 4, 2003, domesticity guru Martha Stewart was indicted on charges of securities fraud and obstruction of justice. Stewart was accused of insider trading related to a stock sale in a biotech company. She was eventually convicted and served time in prison. 2014 ISIS captures Mosul. On June 4, 2014, ISIS captured the Iraqi city of Mosul, marking a significant moment in the rise of the terrorist organization. The capture of the city gave ISIS control of a major population center and a foothold in Iraq. 2020 George Floyd protests continue. On June 4, 2020, protests against police brutality and racial injustice continued across the United States in response to the killing of George Floyd, an unarmed black man, by a Minneapolis police officer. The protests sparked a national reckoning with systemic racism and police violence.